that we are video and audio recording this meeting. It's available on YouTube. Mr. Vargas, Mrs. Williams, roll call.
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Paul Alexander.
Here.
Ms. Stacy Fleming.
Here.
Ms. Shantae Jones.
Here.
Mr. Carlos Vargas.
Here.
And Ms. Rachel Kirkland.
Here. Thank you. Mr. Vargas, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any additions and corrections to the agenda?
No.
No.
Seeing none, can I get a motion for approval of the agenda?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. All right. Next up, the consent agenda. I'm sure everyone has had a chance to review the documents on it.
Yes.
Can I get a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Seeing no opposition, motion carries. Next up, Superintendent Spotlight. Dr. Saunders.
Good evening, board members, and welcome to our newest board member, Ms. Jones, and welcome back to Mr. Vargas as well. I wanted to just take a minute to share a new section of our board meeting, which will be Superintendent Spotlights. This is an opportunity for us to really highlight the amazing work that goes on in our school division every single day, and to really show that to the community, to the board, and to anyone else who will listen. I'm excited this evening to introduce Ms. Kara Grosser, our new Director of Communications and our Director of the Bell Foundation, and she is going to lead us in those spotlights this evening. So, Ms. Grosser?
Good evening, Madam Chair Kirkland and members of the school board. My name is Kara Grosser, and as the Director of Communications with Manassas Park City Schools, I'm excited to present our first school board spotlight segment tonight. It's important to stop and recognize that although we're facing some challenging times right now due to the global pandemic, we still have some pretty amazing things going on in Manassas Park City Schools. Now more than ever, those individuals and groups are in need of recognition and thanks for continuing to see and to be the positivity, the creativity, and the strength behind our school division. In the coming months, I look forward to highlighting the accomplishments of our students, staff, and community members. Our first spotlight tonight is our return to school. On August 23rd, 2021, we opened our doors to all of our students for the first time in nearly 18 months. In a testament to the strength of our community, families, and staff members, the first day of school was a success. Please enjoy a few images from our first day of school. As I gathered some quotes for that presentation, I was able to visit all of our campuses in Manassas Park last week. I've only been in the position for a week, but I was able to visit with a lot of our students around the division. And one thing that really struck me was the excitement in every student I talked to and how happy they were to be back in school. They were almost a little bit starstruck when they saw their teachers and were really excited that that's the person I saw on camera and now I get to see you and talk to you in person. So I wanted to share with you all how excited everybody was to be back on campus, back with their teachers and their friends. Next up, I'd like to spotlight one of our own teachers, Mr. Claude Legrand. Mr. Legrand, the director of bands at Manassas Park High School, recently accepted a $1,000 grant from the Grammy Recording Academy in Washington, D.C. The Academy contacted Legrand in late winter of 2021 after the word spread of his dedication to music in our high school. In a review of band programs at Manassas Park High School, the Academy found the instrumental program as unique and worthy of this great recognition and support. The Grammy Recording Academy represents performers, songwriters, and music professionals and works to ensure that the recording arts remain a thriving part of our cultural heritage through various music programs, including the Grammy Awards, music's only peer-recognized accolade and highest achievement. According to the Grammy Recording Academy, music is the original melting pot, a unifying blend of creeds and cultures. It makes us dance, helps us celebrate, and reminds us that at our heart, we're all the same. Please join me in congratulating Mr. Legrand and his band program at Manassas Park High School. And at this time, I would like to invite him up to the front floor of Thank you. On to public comments. Ms. Williams, do we have anyone signed up for public comments in person?
No, Madam Chair, no one has signed up in person, but I did receive 4 emails.
Okay, thank you.
To be read.
Before we do public comments, I'm going to go ahead and read the guidelines just for clarity. Individuals who wish to address the school board in person need to sign the list maintained on the desk in front of the school board clerk prior to the start of the meeting. When called to the podium or when the letter is read into the record, please say your name and address for the record. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. Mrs. Williams will be timing your comments and raise your hand when you reach the 3 minutes. The board will not give feedback to your comments or questions during public comments time. Should your comments warrant a response, Dr. Saunders will work with her staff to address the concerns, question raised, and will provide a response in a timely fashion. Mrs. Williams?
Ms. Let me know when
Thank
the
you.
time of 3 minutes is up. Thank you. Good evening to the school board, our administration, educators, and the Manassas Park community. My name is Justin O'Malley, and I am an IA at the middle school and president of the NCB. Firstly, I'd like to apologize for not being here in person. Like many school employees, I have to work a second job to make ends meet, and that's where I am now. But what I have to say is too important to wait, because COVID cases are now being reported in our schools daily, and students and staff are regularly being quarantined. The coronavirus has become endemic, which means that each and every one of us, employee, student, administrator alike, will be exposed sooner or later and need time to recover and care for ill loved ones. Thus, I'm imploring you again to implement a clear and comprehensive COVID sick leave policy. School districts across the country have already adopted such policies because they understand that the costs of additional pandemic sick leave are far outweighed by the cost of major outbreaks in their schools. Our own previous administration saw the wisdom of additional COVID leave. Giving employees the financial cover to stay home when they and their families are sick is every bit as essential as a precaution as face masks, contact tracing, and enhanced ventilation to keep our schools safe and functional. And we absolutely must implement the common sense precaution before a major outbreak cripples our schools or worse. In that same vein, I am also calling for our schools to follow in the steps of the school systems across the country by mandating COVID vaccinations for all eligible employees and students. Vaccinating students for a wide variety of communicable diseases is already universally accepted practice, and combined with continued social distancing and masking policies represents our best strategy for keeping them safe and in school. I think we can all agree that we don't want a return to distance learning, nor do we want to see our students or educators on the ever-growing list of 675,000 Americans to date of those who have died of COVID. The best protection is now widely available and fully FDA approved for all adults and many children. Waiting to implement this critical and frankly inevitable policy would be putting all of us at unnecessary risk. Thank you all for your time and your continued commitment to the well-being of our students and the employees that dedicate their lives to learn. This letter is from Sharon Myers. I'm writing today to inquire about the long-term absence policy, regardless of reason, COVID, quarantine, or other medical reason. In review of the COVID protocol policy, I'm not seeing where there is any option for the child that needs to be absent to get actual instruction from his or her teacher. I do understand that Manassas Park does not have the camera technology that follows each and every teacher, but with the weekly emails from the principal telling us of yet another group of children testing positive, I implore you to review and come up with a more acceptable plan that will help those kids who have an extended absence. Given what we have been through in the past 18 months and how Manassas Park was able to adapt, I believe we can do better than a total absence of instruction during an extended absence. Teachers are telling students that they will be posting on Canvas, but what protocols are in place to verify that this is done? Parents are hearing from students. The substitute teachers are telling classes that they have no lesson plans and to play on their phones. Or children go out to grab assignments from Canvas only to find nothing uploaded. Our kids are continuing to fall behind. I know this is a process. We've been able to do synchronous learning last year where students were in the classroom and teachers taught those that remained at home. Please tell me why this cannot continue to happen for those kids that are out for an extended time. Our children need to hear the teacher and see the board for lessons. They do not need to see what the teachers are wearing or actually see them at all except for maybe during roll call. Please consider reviewing protocols and immediately implementing a plan to ensure all children are given a chance for equal instruction. Thank you. This letter is from Harmony Bisco. To all members of Manassas Park City School Board, I am writing to inquire about our school district policy on and discuss our continuing education strategies for when students are quarantined for either exposure or for COVID infection. It has been difficult to find the actual policy printed online, and even when I contacted the school board directly, we could not locate the policy on any of the websites. From my experiences, it seems as if the current standard is for students to quarantine for 2 weeks and procure all of their work from their teacher to perform asynchronously. While the quarantine time is inarguable, the lack of a better communication education contingency plan is unacceptable. Our school district has been one-to-one with technology for quite a number of years, and with successful teaching 100% virtually for an entire year, we should be equipped both strategically and technologically to pick up learning in the classroom should a student have to quarantine. We can do better than talk with the teacher and pick up a packet of work or work at home and let us know if you have questions later. We have to do more than that. Virtual learning or some hybrid form of it should continue to be an option for families who must quarantine or be absent for lengthy periods of time. Realistically speaking, some students may not have to quarantine just one single time. Some students may have to quarantine 2 or 3 times within the current school year. This time would amount to a minimum of 4 to 6 weeks of independent asynchronous learning time. There is a time and place for asynchronous learning, and it is effective for some students in small time frames. However, since the onset of 100% virtual learning, any academic studies have shown the many disadvantages of asynchronous learning, especially in non-collegiate settings. This includes lack of motivation for students who need supervision to stay on task. The students may skip the learning altogether. The time lapse, especially when they have no one directly there to assist them in learning new, challenging, or an interesting material. The time lapse between when students can ask questions while they're working is also disadvantageous. Students who have questions or trouble in understanding new concepts have to wait for answers from teachers who are teaching currently before they can move on to the next lesson or learning step. Lastly, students who are learning asynchronously are going to be missing the social interaction that goes along with being in a classroom. This was a huge to press us to return to 100% in-person learning. It is the hope that before we come to entrenched in our school year, we can develop and publish an improved plan for continuing education with our students who need to be lengthy absent or quarantined for the 2-week period of time. Our current plan places many of our students at a district. Thank you. Hello, my name is Marnie Horton, Manassas Park, Virginia. I am a teacher at Cougar Elementary School and the Vice President of MPEA. It has been amazing to finally see students in our classrooms and educators doing what they love these last few weeks. However, each school has had a handful of COVID-19 cases despite the required masking. In order to keep these teachers and support staff in classrooms, driving our buses, and maintaining our schools, I am writing in support of either mandating the COVID-19 vaccine for the staff and students that are eligible or requiring regular testing. It is time that we join our neighbors in this effort in order to remain in school in person. When a staff member is forced to quarantine for 2 weeks due to not having a vaccine, the staff in the building have to fill in for them in order for them to make the day go smoothly. This takes those educators away from their jobs that are vital to making the school community function well. Our whole mission this year is to keep qualified educators in front of students, and one way to ensure that is by requesting all staff to be vaccinated or tested regularly. Secondly, I implore you to do away with the midpoint pay method and consider an alternative compensation method. Staff is already beginning to consider plans for the 2022-23 school year, many of which include leaving Manassas Park. If we discontinue the midpoint pay method and create a competitive and comprehensive compensation model similar to our neighboring school divisions, we will retain our amazing educators and be able to attract more qualified educators. Our students deserve the absolute best educators in front of them daily, and well-compensated educators is a clear way to ensure that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. All right. Moving on to ongoing business. Mitigation update. Mr. Neff, Ms. Calso, Ms. Kiernan Graham, and Dr. Saunders.
So before the team gets started, I just want to reiterate that they have been working very, very hard. The teachers, the students, the families, everyone has been working to ensure that we can keep as many students in school in front of our staff as possible. I'll just say again that every day is learning, is an opportunity to learn something new and different. The idea that we must be flexible continues to be part of the world that we are living in and making that work every day. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Neff and the team to share some data around where we are with mitigation, to share some data around students' COVID positive cases, and then to share a little bit about our instructional plan. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thank you, Dr. Saunders. This presentation tonight aligns with strategic goal number 3 to provide effective and efficient support for student safety and success. This slide provides a vaccination data point in time. These numbers are based on Friday afternoon's numbers. As you can see, maybe you can see, 860 individuals under the age of 18 have been vaccinated in Manassas Park, so that's in that 12 to 18 range. And that's an increase of 120 individuals from our August meeting, with an overall community vaccination rate up to 60%, which is an increase of 3.1% from our previous meeting in August, and that's for individuals 12 and older. The CDC provides us with a tool to understand community transmission levels and to help us make local decisions. This is a slide that you have seen a couple times before. The 2 indicators that are used to determine the category for transmission are the number of new cases in the past 7 days and the percentage of positive cases in the past 7 days. So, what does it look like for Manassas Park? Currently, we fall in that yellow range, the moderate transmission yellow, yellow level. Meaning basically we've had between 10 and 49.99 new cases per 100,000 over the past 7 days, with the percentage that are positive during that time period at being anywhere between 5 and 7.99%. Obviously, we do not live in a vacuum, so we need to look at local numbers. And this slide shows the numbers, what it looks like in Prince William County, with them being in the high transmission level for new cases per 100,000 the past 7 days. Those cases being over 100, excuse me. And their percentage of new positive tests during the past 7 days being in the moderate transmission range of 5 to 7.99%. This is our tiered response plan, which you have seen before. Currently, if we were just basing it on Manassas Park, we would probably be more in the moderate range, the Tier B range. But because we do look at our neighbors, we have circled the moderate to substantial range. That substantial range, if you'll look at that bulleted point, we have constant conversations with our principals at each of the schools to limit modified in-person gatherings. We continue to require masks indoors and outdoors when in close proximity of one another. And I'm also very happy to report that this year we did add a second daily custodian, ABM, who is basically approaching their duties to clean those high transmission areas where students gather a lot. So there's a lot of wiping of doorknobs and handrails and tables on a regular basis in the bathrooms. So what do we look for when we make a determination on whether to quarantine an individual? This link in this slide is posted on the school division website for our contact tracing team. It is the guide that they use when making a decision whether to quarantine a student or an adult. And as you can see, based on those columns, decisions are based on a number of factors, including the distance apart, the setting, whether the student is vaccinated or unvaccinated, or whether the adult is vaccinated or unvaccinated. It's a good resource for students, staff, and parents to see the thought process that goes into making those determinations on a pretty regular basis these days. So what do we look like from a data collection standpoint? This slide represents data collected from the first day of school until this past Friday, September 17th. The information shared here is at a little higher level, as we are a small school division and do not want to inadvertently identify any individuals. As you can see, as of Friday, we have had 9 students that have tested positive, and we've had to quarantine 83 students and 3 staff members because of close contacts. As of Friday, 0 of those tested positive because of close contact within our schools. All cases have become from outside exposures. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kelso for the continuity of learning.
Thank you, Mr. Neff. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the school board. I'm here this evening to review with you our instructional plans to maintain the continuity of learning as we have begun this 2021-2022 school year. As you know, Senate Bill 1303, signed by Governor Northam this past February, requires school districts in Virginia to provide 5 days a week of in-person instruction this school year. MPCS has utilized the following plan to ensure the continuity of learning in the event that health authorities have required an individual student and or teacher to quarantine, or should there be a temporary closure of the classroom. As we discussed at last month's meeting, if an individual student is quarantined, the student will utilize Canvas to complete asynchronous assignments. I have been working closely with principals and their teams to ensure that teacher check-in with the student is occurring throughout the quarantine. So how will students receive instruction when quarantined? Teachers are working closely with them regarding assignments and instruction that has been directly missed. When a student is required to quarantine, the student and parent will be notified that all assignments and lesson materials can be accessed asynchronously through Canvas. A teacher or designated staff member will be responsible for coordinating the communication of how the student should access their instructional materials and assignments during the duration of the quarantine. Teachers will receive notification that one of their students is in quarantine. This notification serves as a reminder for teachers to ensure that the Canvas page has remained updated and instructional information is clearly labeled for students to access. Students in quarantine accessing learning are marked QP or quarantine present in PowerSchool. Teachers are required to check in with quarantined students. Students and or parents should reach out to teachers via email if they have any questions regarding the instructional materials and assignments that are posted during the length of the quarantine. Please keep in mind that this may look a little different at each level. The student's school and class will remain open for all other students in the case of this individual quarantine. One addition to the original document is students who have an IEP will continue to receive access to special education services while on quarantine. Ms. Kiernan Graham, Executive Director of Special Programs, will speak to this in more detail in a moment. If an individual teacher is quarantined, the teacher will have a substitute assigned to their class who will be prepared to support students in their learning. Every effort will be made to have the sub be the same person throughout the duration of the quarantine. Again, the teacher's school and class will remain open for all other students. If an entire class or class period is quarantined, all of the students and staff in the impacted class will transition to virtual learning. The teacher will work with the school's administration to determine the amount of synchronous and asynchronous time for the class period during the quarantine period. Students would access work for their other classes asynchronously via Canvas. Again, we are well positioned to react to any of these scenarios that have already occurred. Devices have been rolled out to all students, including kindergarten and very soon even to pre-K. Wi-Fi hotspots have been provided by the school to any student that does need one. Whether they're in person or quarantine, all students do have access to a help desk. All of our teachers have created and are updating their Canvas pages on a regular basis. We continue to evolve and reflect on our instructional delivery in these various models and are confident that we can meet the needs of our quarantined students, and especially as conditions change. This is a very fluid, obviously a very fluid situation. I want to thank the teachers and school staff for a smooth start to the school year and for their continued flexibility. I will now ask Ms. Kiernan Graham to come to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and school board members. As you may be aware, ever since we went out in March 2020 and throughout last year, the one thing that changed yet stayed the same was special education. Not only were we not given any extensions of timelines, our obligation to provide services to the greatest extent possible remained. During COVID closures and now with quarantine situations, school divisions must continue to provide students eligible under IDEA access to the services required by the student's IEP, which outlines the unique educational needs and services of each student with a disability. For the purposes of providing continued access to special education services during quarantine, each student's case manager will prepare an individualized written access to special education services while quarantined. It's a mouthful. These plans will outline how services in the IEP will be offered and what accommodations are required while a student is quarantined at home. Although the services will not be identical, as they would be in the physical classroom, they will be based on how a student will learn best virtually based on the current IEP and teacher input. Thank you.
I think that concludes our presentation around decision framework for mitigation and continuity of learning. And the team is ready to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions. I know there are going to be some. Do you want to start, Ms. Fleming? Or?
Sure.
Okay,
Sure. So my first question is about the IEP. So when a student goes into quarantine and how those accommodations are handled, are they accommodations that will take place during the quarantine happen when the IEP is developed, or is it on the fly? The teacher decides when the child decide that they're going under quarantine.
So as soon as a special ed case manager has been notified that they have a student on quarantine, they'll have their plan already written, ready to go, and that plan will be sent home to the parents so they are aware of where and how to find each service. And on that plan, we'll have all the accommodations already listed.
For quarantine at home?
For quarantine.
Okay.
Okay. Any further? We can come back if you develop some more.
The other question I had was, we talked about folks going and quarantining. There's a help desk, and how many people do we have supporting the city on the help desk for supporting the teachers and then also the students? Or is that two separate help desks, or is it one? How many staff do we have supporting them?
Our IT team is absolutely amazing. So we have at least one tech at each building. There's also support over here with our directors and network technician. They've been, by all accounts, have been able to address any issue or ticket that's come up throughout the help desk. At the high school, we also have a class for community service that students actually participate in, and they get to address some of those level 1 issues that come up. As far as in terms of students that are home, we'll continue to access, use that email address. So students can do the email to receive and arrange time for any kind of support that they might be able to get. A lot of times things can be done without even an in-person or whatever it might be. So we're very well adept at being able to address that.
So you would say 4 to 5 full-time staff?
Mm-hmm. And our ITC, so we do have our instructional technology coaches. They're more on the instructional end, whereas the IT techs are more on the hardware end.
Okay. So my last one is with the subs, just making sure that they have access to the curriculum electronically. How is that process handled as far as when a sub comes in or needs to come in the next day? Pretty fast, getting them set up. Is that process pretty seamless and in place where they can access the Canvas information and upload whatever assignments or whatever they need to do to support the class?
A lot of our teachers already have those things in place, so when they're out, it's just able to come right over into Canvas. But yes, we're working with our substitutes in order to get them online. That starts immediately, and thanks to Ms. Williams for her processing and getting them into the system, whether it's an email address or Canvas access. For long-term substitutes, we do have them take the remote learning for Canvas course, which helps them learn how to utilize the Canvas pages and be able to navigate around that to assist students.
So what would you say the turnaround time is when we,
Turnaround, it really depends on a case-by-case basis.
if they're new, they've never been here?
It has to happen pretty quickly, so 24 to 36
Hours?
hours.
Okay.
As best as they can. And our assistant principals work closely with the substitutes in order to get them set up for success. It works out great if we can place a substitute in for the quarantine period, because they're just it's easier and easier for the sub to access all of that as the quarantine period goes on.
The reason why I asked too is just so that people know that we need to be patient, because it's not
Yes.
easy to get folks set up. I'm an IT person, so I get it, but once they're set up, that's pretty good. 24, 36 hours is pretty good, so that's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Vargas?
I'm just trying to get my bearings at this point, so I will.
We can
defer
come back.
Any kind of questions.
All right. Mr. Alexander?
Cool. All right. So on slide 9 references 9 positive student cases. I just wanted to confirm 0 staff is correct then? I'm assuming we haven't had any staff, because I didn't see any references to staff cases.
So this is data as of September 14th. This is a moving target.
Okay.
And so at any given time or moment or point in time that you would ask us this question, these numbers are going to look different
Gotcha.
based on the
But
situation.
as of the 14th, like we haven't had staff.
As of the 14th.
Gotcha. All right. I was just making sure that that number is included, it's not like we're only reporting students, we're reporting student and staff.
We're reporting students and staff, and I would just caution that these are the cases that we have been working with or contact tracing with. There may be a case where there was no contact tracing required because that staff member or person was not even in the building. And so, again, these data are internal. This is what we as a team have come up with and continue to work with the nurses. I wouldn't say it's anything completely finally, the final numbers of anything, but this gives you an idea, a point in time, a snapshot, so to speak, to know what we're dealing with.
Gotcha. All right. On slide 7, when we're going to looking at the different tiers and we're in the substantial to moderate, are we from the mitigation responses? Are we kind of still doing tier B, or are we also doing now the bolded part in tier C, the limited and modified personal gatherings?
So we have, I think, as Mr. Neff said, we've been talking with principals about limiting the amount of large gatherings that they would have with either staff, students, trying to think about class meetings and how do you have them in smaller groups? How do you do some things that keep us a little more distance? Certainly the high school's having a lot of conversation around typical high school activities that are coming up, that are being planned. We want to make sure that we provide our students with as many opportunities as we can, but knowing they will have to look different. Principals are doing a great job of making those things happen. Actually, our students are doing a great job of giving input into that. I know that Mr. Forrest is talking with the student government and really just having a good opportunity to think differently.
When we're talking about the 82 students that have quarantined up till the date of the 14th, I know we're following up with the teachers to make sure that they're updating their lessons plan. Is anybody reaching out to the families or the students? Mainly the reason I know from last year we experienced the teachers were online and they were there to give the curriculum, but some of the kids just dropped off. So are we, making sure that these kids are actually still participating?
Yes, as part of the plan, the teacher check-in is required, and we're continuing to follow up with the principals to ensure that happens.
But on the kids' side, though, are we reaching out to the families to make sure that they feel like they're getting what they need?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Do we know our staff's vaccination rate? No. Okay. And last 2 questions. synchronous versus asynchronous. Is it possible to get, obviously not, I know it's a much more complicated situation than we think it is, so maybe something in writing or an email that kind of just explains kind of what the challenges are, where and what we need to get to be able to provide the quarantine kids some level of interaction. That seems to be the reoccurring theme that most families have brought up, is they need to see their teachers. They have questions. I know, my kids have experienced, the interaction with teachers has been invaluable compared with all the new curriculum they're learning. So I would imagine, I just would feel horrible for some of these kids at home if they can't. So I'd just be interested to hear kind of what challenges we need to overcome to get to being able to do that. And then the last piece, with the Biden mandate for employers over 100 going to requiring a vaccination, have we heard anything from the state or from the government on what those mandates and if they're coming?
We haven't heard anything official, but we do believe through other organizations, whether it's the Department of Labor, the DOLE regulations, or through OSHA, there will be some information coming as to what mandates exist for us, but we don't have anything specific at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Jones, do you have any questions?
Do. Thank you. I'm kind of going off what Mr. Alexander was saying about the asynchronous learning, just thinking about direct instruction and what Canvas offers. And it may vary by class, it may vary by grade, but do we know, is it just like they go in, do a worksheet, or is there something interactive, or is the teacher recording instruction or recording a lecture so that they can kind of get some instruction?
It's a mix. I would say that that's a mix. It depends on the levels, and there's certainly opportunities in Canvas, as you know, to post videos, or the templates in Canvas lend themselves well to following along with what a daily lesson would look like, which could include putting in the presentations with notes, so that students could see that. There's sometimes an interactive element to that with Pear Decks. It seems to be a popular software tool that we use, and that way there is that kind of back and forth with the teacher on that. And the ability to post daily and weekly agendas, objectives for the day, all of that can be done within Canvas, as well as submitting work, grades, everything can be housed in there.
Okay, excellent. 'Cause my other question was about how learning was being measured for those students that were out for an extended period of time.
And certainly there are formative and summative assessments that are used, and I know with our teachers, when the students return to the classroom, there's even going to be more of a focus on, do we still have other gaps that need to be filled for that missed instruction? Students that are beyond 10 days of quarantine, so beyond the 2 weeks, will be assigned a homebound instructor. So there are some cases with extended quarantines, oftentimes within families, where students are beyond those 2 weeks. Missing 2 weeks of school. They could be in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They will be assigned a homebound instructor, which will give them a little bit more contact and follow up.
Okay, thank you. And you answered my third question about if there was remediation a student needed when they came back.
Yes, and we are exploring different remediation programs at all of the levels. It's beyond just SOL, regular SOL prep, but supporting students of all needs.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you.
You too.
Some of my questions, we're going to kind of go on to the homebound. The 82 cases for students, does that include students who have not had to be contact traced at school? Rather, they were, there was a family member in the home that came down with COVID, and they were not, they had no, there wasn't a need, there wasn't necessarily a need to contact trace at school. We know it was in the home. So are they counted in those numbers? And then it gets to the virtual homebound, because I was going to point out the rather lengthy absence those students have. Generally that 10 days becomes 24 days. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about what that looks like for students versus what the asynchronous. So if you could give me a little more information on that, that would be great.
Yes, so the number of students contact traced in quarantine would be, we think, it would be all students that are or have been in quarantine during that time period. They haven't been in the whole time. They've had their segment, but that's a cumulative number of students.
Okay.
The 82. Those
So
are
not
not necessary. Those were not positive cases.
Okay.
Those were students, all students that we put in quarantine. So that answers, I think, that question. As far as the homebound, I think Pam answered that. If we have extended beyond the typical required quarantine periods, those students are being assigned homebound teachers and are receiving virtual live instruction and support for a number of hours as required through homebound services, and I believe it's 10 hours a week for secondary, 5 for elementary.
Yeah, I was just thinking, given the time that we've been in school, you might have students that have not had a chance to actually attend yet because they or their families contracted right at the beginning of the school year, so they didn't even have a chance to come. Because that I was thinking about the differentiation between you guys identifying, cases that you have to quarantine and the parents quarantining and saying, hey, we've got a case here in the home.
Yes.
So I was wondering if there was any differentiation in those numbers.
No.
No, they're all the same. Okay, good to know. And then just in terms of how instruction is going in the schools, there's a lot of talk about Canvas and whether assignments are up there. And certainly we know the secondary campus has a lot more experience with Canvas and, ensuring that the content's there and working with that platform. Has there been a lot of professional development to really encourage the embrace of it on the elementary level for the youngest grades, to really kind of incorporate it, even though we're back in the physical setting of school this year, to really, incorporate the inclusion to kind of meet the need this year?
Yes, we actually have a new template front screen for elementary. It makes it much easier to navigate between your reading, your math, and teachers have received training on that, and students have been exposed to it. And as I walk through the elementary schools, the kids are on their computers and they're using it. We have a kindergarten class that's is virtual, and within 24 hours, all parents have been contacted, taught how to help their kid get onto Canvas, and they've gone live with support. So if kindergarten is doing it, I'm very confident that K through 12 would be able to do that as well. So it speaks very highly of our teachers and their ability to jump in and to support quickly, as well as our IT and ITCs at the building levels.
And is there any place, somebody mentioned, one of the letters mentioned about information about policies, or where, if somebody wanted more information on this, where would they go on the website to find more information?
Great question. So on the front, there's a button to access COVID. It says COVID-19 resources. It's right underneath the large picture in the banner. We've been working with Ms. Grosser as far as how to access that and to get to those documents. And certainly, if parents have any concerns, I would be happy to share the direct link with them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any follow-on questions before we let them?
Just one. I wanted to know what, being substantial, limited, modified in-person gatherings, what's the impact on our sports program? Or is there any impact with that new criteria?
Not currently. We continue to follow the VHSL guidance and any VDH recommendations that occur, but the sports programs have continued on throughout all of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the American Rescue Plan Act, the ESSER 3 update. Mrs. Calso.
All right. Do we see it up here? board docs. I'm sorry for the delay.
Quite all right.
Oh, okay.
That's the banner you were just talking
Here's
about.
the
right there.
banner.
Yeah, I was gonna
Stay
say, I
up to
went and tried
date.
it out just while you were telling me.
So when you go here, there's all sorts of FAQs. The plan is probably about 3/4 of the way down the page.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay. Is he trying to work the mouse or is it me? All right. Good evening again, Madam Chair, members of the school board. I am pleased to be here this evening to share with you updates regarding the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, also known as the ESSER 3 federal grants. The implementation of the ESSER 3 grant aligns with strategic goal number 3 to provide effective and efficient support for students' safety and success. Just a reminder that the purpose of this federal grant is to help safely reopen and sustain the safe operation of schools and to address the impact of the pandemic on our students. The grant usage period is through September 30th, 2024. Requirements of the grant dictate the inclusion and consideration of stakeholder input on the usage of grant funds from students, families, community members, and the like, as well as teachers, administrators, and other school staff. Stakeholders that represent the special interest of students with disabilities, English learners, and underserved students were also sought out for input. MPCS sought this public input and feedback through a stakeholder survey sent directly to families and to the school district staff in July. The link was also shared with the community. The survey gave special consideration to addressing unfinished learning and student needs, prevention and mitigation strategies, and seeking other ideas for uses of the funds. Nearly 700 people participated in this bilingual survey, with 88% of the respondents being our families. There was no additional input from the public hearing that was held at the August 16th school board meeting. Top priorities of stakeholders are outlined in this chart. Evidence-based programs, the social emotional needs of students, maintenance of healthy facilities, and technology were all identified as top priorities by our stakeholders. Based on the collective input, we have broken down the anticipated usage of funds across the 4 main categories. As a requirement of the grant, at least 20% of the funding must be used to address unfinished learning. Breaking it down even further, specific prevention and mitigation strategies would include much needed upgrades to the air handlers at CES and MPMS, and restocking our PPE inventory. Addressing student needs will include professional learning regarding mental health supports, working with English learners and students with disabilities, and the purchase of evidence-based programs that support the whole child. Under addressing unfinished learning, the district will offer targeted academic support not only after school, but on the weekends and evenings. We're exploring the use of contracted tutoring services and already thinking about summer school and how we can continue to leverage that time to close achievement gaps that grew during the pandemic. Other possible uses of the funds include translation services for our families of students with disabilities and English learners, as well as any additional technology needs that may come up in our various instructional delivery models that are used this school year. As required by the grant, there is a maintenance and equity component. Consideration will be given to ensuring that the grant funds will be equitably used across the 4 schools in the division. In addition to this requirement, we will be posting our safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan on the district's website. The influx of federal funding is a welcome support as we continue to navigate the learning loss that occurred during the pandemic, as we work to close achievement gaps, and as we continue to provide a safe and healthy learning environment to meet the physical and social emotional needs of our students. I want to thank the community and our school staff for their input, and thank you to the board for your continuous support.
Thank you, Mrs.
Any
Causa.
questions?
Any questions from the board?
What's the duration? Do we have it planned do we have the duration for the plan of expenditure on all of those items?
So we have through September 30th of 2024.
That's what, 2 years, year and a half?
Approximately $2.5 million that was allocated to Manassas Park City Schools.
So what I was trying to get at was the tutoring services and the catch-up. Are we distributing it pretty evenly across up
The
to
300.
2024, or are we have a plan to expend it all within a single year, or how are we
We're
doing
looking to see the sustainability of it. So for some items, it may be possible to go the 3 years. For some, it may not. We may look at some positions for support, as we did with the ESSER 2 grant, and if those could be continued using this grant funding as well.
Just one.
Yep.
So, piggybacking on the sustainability part, is ESSER 4 going to be coming?
I don't know, but we now have CARES,
Okay, I'm just curious.
ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. Obviously, the federal government is providing quite a bit of money to states, and states are pushing that out to local jurisdictions.
Nobody has a magic ball for that.
Yeah, no, I'm just assuming, obviously, if that comes to fruition, then that kind of would also change how we'd spend the ESSER 3 funding, because we could compress it to the front end, knowing that there's another wave of funds coming.
There's another matching grant that just came out regarding construction, so we are looking at that with the air handlers. It's a match,
Right.
so that would free up some additional funds within ESSER 3 that we could direct elsewhere.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, from the technology aspect, it's got $500,000 attached to it. I mean, there are two items, but one of them is technology. So I keep hearing the issue about the fear of the kids falling behind during asynchronous learning. So if at some point, things let's just say that we have a spike in COVID cases, and those 9 go to 50, 60, 70, in which basically we would almost be, in a position where we need to return to virtual learning. Are we to the point that we can actually sustain, make that a sustainable paradigm of teaching our kids?
As far as virtual learning,
Yes.
if we were to shift to that,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
We could do that very, very quickly. I'm confident in that with our IT department as well as our instructional staff.
With the infrastructure that's already in place. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think my only question is just follow-on information, as this develops, maybe just, a check-in somewhere down the line.
Yes, it's actually part of the requirements, so 6 months from now, I'll be back up here again providing an update, and hopefully by that time we've submitted at least the first round of the application. The application does allow us to make amendments as needed, especially with a 3-year period.
Right. Very good. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to new business, VSBA policies first reading. Mr. Neff. Good to have you.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Before you tonight is the first reading of the policy additions and changes. The proposed changes are required to align the school board policy manual with the changes in statutes and recommended changes from VSBA. Normally, when you receive them, it's a whole packet. It's like December and June, and you might have 40 or 50 different updates. These are just two updates this time. One of them for policy AD, educational philosophy. There's a legal reference that was updated, and in the other GAA, that's staff time schedules. The policy itself and the cross-references were revised. There is no action needed from the school board tonight, but it is recommended that you approve at your second reading, which would be our October meeting. As usual, I ask that the board take a look at the first reading. Should you have any questions, please email me, and I will respond to the whole group to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you. If everyone could get their questions into him by just, as a guideline, our next work session, that gives him time to respond appropriately. So we have a chance to review everything before we meet again on our next full regular board meeting, which is October 18th. If that would work for everyone. Any questions right now? Always like getting a brief packet for this. Thank you. Okay, and continuing on, you also have the roof project at the high school.
Yes, ma'am. Members of the board, I want to provide the board with an update on the Manassas Park High School roof project, the replacement project that we were in hopes of beginning last summer. Of course, it got pushed back because of supply chain delays. But Dr. Saunders, Mr. Lyon, Mr. Simpson, Mr. Force, and I met with Blake Giddens. I'm sure you remember him. He's the project manager on this. He's from Restoration Engineering, and as well as representatives from Chu Construction. Chu Construction was the vendor that was selected after the bids were put out. We met with them last Tuesday. Chu has secured the materials and can begin the project, and would like to begin to mobilize and complete the upper roof section. That's the original roof. That's without the addition right now. We were elated to hear that they've secured those materials. We think we could handle the logistics on the ground, but we do have some concerns with students being in the building when this is taking place. So I wanted to provide you an update with that tonight. The logistics of the project to replace the original membrane as well as adding installation would include completing approximately 2,000 square foot per day. Basically what that would be is 2 to 3 classrooms. While working on those phases, and this is, again, I want to preempt this is from our Tuesday discussion, classrooms would need to be displaced while they worked on that particular 2,000 square foot section each day, just because of what we anticipated. Prior to beginning the project, all CHU employees that will be on site will need to complete a background check, and they would only access the roof via outside access, so they would not be in our buildings in front of our children. During discussions, a number of questions did arise regarding the safety of students, staff, and noise issues with the displacement of the classrooms. Mr. Force added some valuable input that pretty much all their classrooms are booked first and second block every day. So we'll continue to work through those concerns with Blake and the Chu Construction Company. Today, we completed after-hours testing of noise levels to help in making a decision about how to move forward. Mr. Simpson and I were pleasantly surprised to report that it was not nearly as loud as we anticipated in the classroom directly beneath where they were drilling the screws in. So they actually went on the roof and drilled screws in, and Paul and I were underneath in the classroom with other representatives. The noise level wasn't nearly as bad as what we anticipated being. We asked them to do it again, and we stepped out in the classrooms across the hall, and we could not even hear the drilling that was taking place. Also discussed today, they seemed very amenable to having their crews maybe start as early as 5 or 5:30 in the morning to do that section, because according to the construction engineers, they only need about 2 hours of noise time a day. The rest of the time we'll be working with the membrane itself, removing it, adding the new membrane. So that was a pleasant piece of information to receive, that we might not need to even replace or re-divvy the classrooms itself. So we're continuing to work through those details. They're going to send us a mock-up of classrooms and what 2,000 square feet looks like on a daily basis and lay it out day by day of how many days it would take to do that old part of the high school roof. So I will continue to provide those details and updates to you. And I will share that information with the board so that you are always aware should any questions arise from community members about what's going on the roof. But I want to reiterate that student and staff safety is of the utmost importance on this project, and we're going to continue to have dialogue with Mr. Giddens and Chew Construction about how we can make this happen in a really safe and timely fashion.
Any questions?
Any concerns about weather delays? I mean, as the weather gets cooler, because I mean, as an engineer, I know that there are issues when the temperatures start to drop, right?
It's my understanding 40 degrees and that's it.
Okay.
So yes, it may be something they start and they go as much as they can until the springtime.
That kind of leads, I was thinking about that when you were talking about the early morning hours, the temperature, because we were talking offline about that before the meeting started, but then also daylight or lack thereof. But I assume they would light around it?
Correct. They would, and I'm sure in the business that they're in, that they would have that lighting and have probably been asked or required to do things in similar fashion before when they're working on projects. If not, we certainly would want to do whatever we can so that we don't have to displace classrooms. So it might be a decision on whether we purchase lighting for that or not. I'm just not at that point yet that I can confirm that. But yes, they seemed very open to the possibility of doing so, which led me to believe that that is something that they have done in the past.
Okay. Yeah, do keep us abreast of that.
Yes.
I have a quick question. Are they working weekends? Are they going to take advantage of weekends?
We've talked about that. Of course, the rocks that are up on the roof that hold down the membrane, those have to be removed. That's going to be a rather loud and time-consuming project. So that's certainly something we talked about last week that could be possibly done on a weekend. It's not something we would want to do when kids are in school, that's for sure.
Okay.
So, two questions. Any cost change compared from the quote to finally securing the materials, or is it?
I have not been made aware of any.
Okay.
So 1.58.
Good news.
1.584, I believe, is what the cost was.
Okay. And then, how large of a crew are we talking about? And the reason I'm asking is specifically, like, I know parking is very limited down there. I know that, and then kind of getting back to your point with background checks on all the workers and stuff like that. I mean, I'm assuming we're not going to have them take their breaks and lunches on the roof, so there's going to be times where they're coming down on camp and they'll be on the campus.
Actually, if you think about it, and it's a field that isn't often thought of, but down below the high school student parking lot,
Right.
there's a baseball field back there around the retaining pond.
Yeah.
That's like the perfect area for logistics for setup of their stuff. It's fenced, so that's what I would recommend, that they do that stuff down there.
Okay. And from a mingling on campus standpoint, it's pretty much just the roof and then the travel path between that staging area.
Correct, and it certainly would be reiterated about the safety with students in and out of that parking lot at all times of the day. I think he said Tuesday roughly 10 to 15 members on site a day, so not a large number of staff.
Cool. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Any further questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to school board member appointments. That is the discussion that I am leading. So we finally have a full board. Welcome back, Carlos. Welcome, Ms. Jones. We have several ancillary committees on which we serve, and we kind of needed to get those straightened away for this school year. The list includes the Park and Recs Advisory Committee, the Joint Board of the Special Education Regional Committee, the Social Services Advisory Board, the Gov School. There are 2 seats on that currently. The term that's up is Paul's. Okay. And then I currently sit on as well. And then the voting delegate and the alternate to the VSBA Delegate Assembly. And there are other things you can get involved with as well with VSBA if you wish to. I know I'm doing the federal relations as well this year, but these are the ones that we have to come together as a board and sort out. And we sort of waited until we had a full complement of 5 people to be able to get this straightened out. Parks and Rec doesn't meet often, but there's always the potential for it to start meeting again. My recollection was like it was a Wednesday or a Thursday night. Sped Regional has been sort of off and on because it's not twice a year. Social Services Advisory Board is a monthly commitment. The Governor's School is Thursdays 5 times a year, and the graduation. And then the VSBA Delegate Assembly is this year. We've sort of got that worked out. I know you'd expressed, Ms. Fleming, an interest in doing social services. Is that still something you wish?
They meet on Thursday, I thought. Did you say that?
Social services, Ms. Williams. At one point, I thought it was Mondays. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I recall it being on Mondays. I can,
I think we can make something work.
okay. I recall that specifically being on Mondays.
So it's once a month?
Yeah. And that's fairly consistent.
Okay.
I know you'd expressed an interest in that, so if you're still willing to do it,
Yeah.
you certainly can have that. Do you wish to stay in the Parks and Rec?
Yeah, I mean, in the past couple of years, I think we met one time or twice.
Right.
And that's when there were issues with the usage of the pool and stuff like that. That was the extent of it.
Yeah.
At some point we talked about, the ability to link up with Parks and Rec to basically help our kids with, after hour activities, but
Yeah.
I don't think that, I don't think there's anything ever came out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
okay.
keep it.
Okay. All right. So then that leaves and we're doing sort of vice chair and chair for the VSBA Delegate Assembly.
Mhm.
I think Paul was willing to take the lead and I was willing to back him up on that. So that really leaves the Gov School and the Regional Special Education Joint Board. Now, Gov School, the joint board is twice a year. And the Gov School's got 4 more meetings. Paul started it for this year, but would not mind getting it off his plate, or how are you feeling now?
My schedule's actually, I went and looked at the entire meeting schedule for the whole year, and I don't have any conflicts, but I'm also more than happy if somebody else wants to. I'm a team player.
You're a team player.
So-
Okay.
I can do whatever we want to do. But I don't have any conflicts with Gov School.
Joint board might be a nice baby step, because it meets twice a year, usually after work hours, so that one's fairly easy, and I would be happy to back you up on it.
Okay, sounds good.
So, does that sound amenable to everyone? Everyone's got a job? And,
works.
okay. All right. That was quick and virtually
That was
painless.
easy.
Fantastic. All right. I believe we have addressed all the committees. Is there anything else, Madam Clerk?
No, Madam Chair, that's fine.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Moving on to governance norms and protocols. Mr. Alexander, you're taking the lead on this one.
Yeah, so I guess rather than reading it, has everyone had a chance to read the norms? And everyone got it? I had sent in a couple of requests that Dana had already updated on verbiage, mainly just pronouns and
Just pronouns for
yeah,
the
exactly.
superintendent.
Did anyone have? I have a couple notes on a couple points, but did anybody else have anything that they wanted updates made to, or I can kind of lead it off with some of the stuff that I thought about that, and I don't know if we wanted. I don't know if it's splitting hairs or not, but there were certain points, like with responses to the community, where it says we follow up with a letter. Do a letter versus an email? Is it splitting hairs to differentiate the two?
You can say correspondence.
Yeah,
And
that's
just
some
use
of
the word correspondence versus letter.
There were a couple others where references to the use of social medias. Board members will respond to social media requests by using the spirit of the following statement. The statement I have no issue with. I was just wondering if we're basically creating the expectation, when he says board members will respond, it creates the expectation that there will always be a response. And in some cases, we don't engage through social media.
Right.
So I wasn't sure if there was a better way to word that, just
If
to
board members respond,
something to that
they will
effect.
use,
Yeah.
if board members respond, they will use the spirit of the following statement?
Yeah. Anything. I just wanted to come make sure that we don't create the expectation of a response. Right, when there
boom. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
Right underneath that, when it comes to notifying the schools, this is one I always seek clarification on, because like most of us, have kids in the schools. If we show up to work the concession stand, I don't think Dr. Saunders wants us to call and give her a heads up that that's happening. So I wasn't sure if we needed to maybe say, like, when acting in a board capacity, then that we would notify the superintendent. But if it's in a parent, I'd make sure you were comfortable with that.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then the only other question I really had was on the very last one. The board should update and evaluate the school board strategic plan on a regular basis. Do we need to define what a regular basis is?
So the strategic plan is in five-year increments.
Yeah.
And I would say
We don't have to if we don't
so
need to.
it's difficult. It's difficult because this document, ostensibly, again, we've delayed this because this is the first
Right.
time we've had a 5-person board together. This is an organizational thing. On one hand, the board exists every year. It changes from year to year. So we can't tell a board ahead of us what to do.
Right.
We could prescribe something that the board should, every 3 years or every 2 years, look at the strategic plan, but it could get stricken the next year. I think we kind of,
We can leave it this way too, and maybe
Yeah.
perhaps within the strategic plan established, and maybe just as noted within the strategic plan.
It may need to reside there as good practice, because I think the strategic plans review and the life of that document may be the prescriptive thing and not this document.
Gotcha. And I did want one point of clarification, because we are supposed to notify the principals when we do volunteer in the schools. That's one of the norms. So obviously, I just wanted that is covered for reaching out to the schools. It's just I didn't want to bother the superintendent with that information. So those were my suggestions on updates. I wasn't sure if anyone else had any. Like I said, most of the spirit of it all is the same. There were a couple things I just felt like I wanted to clarify. I don't know if anyone has any.
So I'm looking at that. I'm just kind of pondering the last one still. because I'm all about making sure that the strategic plan aligns with the actions of the school and our actions as well. And as we move forward, that the adopted strategic plan that we've all agreed on, this is the direction of our schools, that our actions and our funding, our budget all supports that plan, just as when what was presented today, they said these are the goals that we're aligning to. So I think we are evaluating, and we are not necessarily, we're not updating the strategic plan, but we should make sure that the steps and that as we move forward, that we're aligning with that direction.
I think that's a conversation that we've had in the past, in which basically, there's the Manassas Park City School strategic plan, and whatever we have as our own as an internal board strategic plan definitely needs to have almost like a one-to-one correlation with what the school system wants to do or is planning on doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that goes back to, some of the things that we've seen in, now that Dr. Saunders is on board, with the alignment to the strategic plan in our presentations and stuff. That goes back to a wish that we've had that's kind of gone through various iterations of this board to make sure that our work and what we're doing is aligning to it. But it's just, putting in the time to make sure everything's meeting up, to make sure that we're taking the time to, visit our strategic plan and make sure that the work we're doing is lining up with that. And, it's hard to make sure that we're clicking all of the boxes when you meet twice a month. And, so it's just putting the time in to make sure that we're clicking everything. But, as far as a norm and a protocol, it's a good and noble one, and it is a place to start. To make sure that we, at least have the intent of doing that, and try to get us more to that point of, making sure that we are aligning ourselves and that we're a part of that, and that we're visiting that strategic plan, and that we're doing that work, and we're part of.
The other question I have is the self-evaluations. The board conducts a self-evaluation annually. How is that process handled? Who does that?
The board evaluation? It's a self-evaluation.
Yeah, it's self-reflective.
Do we review it together? Is it something that we present to the citizens based on our feedback? Is it something that we just...
It's internal. It just is a reflection to try to...
I think the spirit of this was internally to say, okay, I think, we met the bar here, here, and here. And just like we do with the superintendent, I said, you know what? I think next year, because we all have, 3-year terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like next year, we should work on this, and then, basically carry that over to say, hey, look, like I said, we covered most of what we needed to cover, but I think we were deficient on this particular
Does
item.
the superintendent have some input on that?
Not that I know in the past.
Historically, no, but I'm not averse to it.
I'm not either. I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Do a 360 type
Yeah.
thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Just
mean,
another
if-
thing
if
for
we
you.
can-
Sorry.
No, we don't, like I
Just
said.
see the bottom
we don't-
half of your
yeah,
face.
Exactly. I can just see her eyebrows just go up like that. Yeah, but
Well, I think good feedback is objective feedback, and when we just evaluate ourselves, it's like evaluating your friends. You're going to be kind. So I think objective feedback is a good thing.
No,
We
I
learn and
mean,
grow that way, right?
And if our job is to support her work, and we're not going to know how to support her if she doesn't give us that feedback.
I think that feedback, if historically, has been very much coming back on a regular basis from the superintendent to the chair and the vice chair.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of like, it reaches the rest of the board.
Just thinking more formal though.
Right,
Yeah.
and however more formal we want to make it, that's up to us. I
Yeah.
mean, it could be just
Yeah.
a single session in which we all sit down and they're like, hey, this is what I need. This is where I need you folks to step up.
Absolutely.
Ideally, it's the part of the purpose of our retreats. And, those are notoriously hard to schedule, but that is, a work in progress. And I think, I have some hope that in the future, that's just something that we're going to be able to get better with and at. And, while respecting each other's time and commitments, because we all have them. So, okay. So, Ms. Williams, did you make note of the changes? Okay. So, yeah, she's going to make the changes as prescribed this evening. She will send the document back to us to review. Now, was the intention to pass this at not at the work session, it would be at the next business meeting on the 18th, and then we would sign it?
Mm-hmm.
So we would just put it under the consent for approval, and then we would sign it that evening?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so if anyone has any questions after that next iteration goes out, please send them, immediately, because that's how it will be presented. Okay. All right. Upcoming meetings. School board work session, Monday, October 4th, 6:59 p.m. here in the school board meeting room. And our next regular school board meeting is Monday, October 18th, 2021. Also 6:59 p.m. here in the school board meeting room. Board member comments. Any board member comments?
No comment?
I'm just glad to be back in the land of the living.
Welcome, Shantae. Welcome back, Carlos. It's nice to have a full room.
Pleasure to meet you, ladies.
Extremely nice to have a full room. My clerk asked me to make a couple of reminders here regarding public comments. We do not read anonymous letters. Please, those of you who are sending in emails, be sure to include your address in the emails, whether you're staff or a citizen. Please just jot down your street address in the emails, because they're required for whether or not your name's on them. We still need the address. And also, as much as she loves reading all of these emails, these meetings are public and they are open to everyone. So please feel free to return to the meetings if you are comfortable doing so. They are public meetings and they are open to you all. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute recess before we go into closed session.